What's the power of storytelling?
The power of storytelling really is about shifting the narrative of what people think is possible. So, part of my personal brand impact statement is that I want people to know that they are worthy
Mhm.
of success. That's number one. I want you to feel significant. I don't tell people that they should feel important because for me, importance implies that there is a competition or a ranking. Significance is consistent regardless of whether or not you're on your best day or your worst day. And the thing that I want people to do is live as though their dreams are unfolding, not just possible. And one of the things that I've had to do is shift the way I live because it's one thing for me to show up and support other people, but if I'm not showing how I'm living my best life, then I'm cutting the idea short of what representation looks like and what is possible.
So, Unica, if somebody is listening to this and they are feeling overlooked, underutilized, invisible, and even questioning their sense of purpose, they are in a professional environment and very high achievers, but they still feel stuck. With your personal branding background, your expertise in communications and people finding their voice, and also with your experience across a few industries and your attendance in these conferences where you are listening from other leaders and learning from them, what advice do you have for this kind of person watching this right now?
The first thing I want to do is tell them to affirm themselves. Looking for anything external is always a risk because you can't promise that. You can keep your promises to yourself. That's the first thing I want to tell you. The second thing is if you do feel like you actually need to move, don't wait for the next perfect opportunity. Take a 10% better leap. It's going to make a difference in how you grow and evolve. Staying in a place that's not healthy for you for too long will linger far longer than you expect. So maybe you stayed someplace, 2 years too long. You might spend 2 years healing emotionally from that experience. Move on before it's perfect. Because I know a lot of times you can get in a place where you feel shrunken and you're like, well, what if I get it wrong? It's okay if you get it wrong because now you get to make another decision with more data. That's
Yeah,
a and so that's what you have to be mindful of. It doesn't have to be perfect next move. It just needs to be better. And if it was 5% better or 25% better, that is progress worth celebrating.
Unica, welcome to my show.
Thank you for having me, Felix. It is such a pleasure. Thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be talking to you again. I know you are one of my first few guests that showed up on the show when I was starting this, and today I'm happy to bring you back, probably 1 year after, right?
Yeah, it's been about a year, yes, and so much has changed.
Yeah, most people are going to benefit from this because you are the voice of communications, marketing, proposal writing, and even for leadership, helping people, aspiring leaders, to use their voice and communicate so that they can showcase their value. I know my audience are going to benefit from all this. But before we start, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are?
Thank you for the opportunity. So my name is Uniqueka Walcott. I am the founder and lead strategist at Uniqueka Walcott Communications, where we elevate executive voices. So one of the things you'll learn about me is that I don't feel like people who are executives or speaking and in the public eye necessarily need a makeover. What they need is clarity around the value that they bring to their community and their profession. And so one of the ways I've learned to find my voice started way back in high school when I was asked to write an autobiographical essay. And my teacher came to me. She said, "Wow, this is really good. It's really powerful." And so she said, "You actually have a writer." She said, "You have a voice, excuse me, as a writer." And that was the first time I was introduced to the concept of having a voice in writing. What I've gone to discover is that I have a voice that calms rooms when I speak, that shifts the energy in the space. And I've taken and evolved that into so many facets, not just of my career, but of my personal life. And so in my career, I've won over $1 billion in government contracts through elevating executive voices, spending time with engineers, architects,
Mhm.
scientists, helping them express their value to clients at the federal, state, and local government level for contracts ranging from things like bridges to bat mitigations to ports in Tanzania. And so I've had a wonderful time elevating executive voices through writing and proposal development. But now I've shifted gears and I begin to focus more on elevating voices so that people can develop personal brands. And a lot of people think that personal branding is kind of a tacky idea. And for me, I think that it's an opportunity for you to get paid what you're worth, step into leadership, negotiate like a pro because now they understand where you're coming from before you ever set foot in the room. It's also a wonderful opportunity to attract sponsors and advocates. And so, Felix, I'm really excited to share my expertise with people today.
Yeah, I think you've covered a lot there. I remember one time I went to a seminar, and after this person finished talking, there was a long line. People were lining up, and they were asking her questions. And I lined up, and she was talking about people finding their voice and loving their voice. She's an expert in this area. So I lined up and I went to ask, how can I love my voice? And this is what she replied to me. Your voice is beautiful. So I'll never forget that. And so since then, I enjoy hosting people like this. I enjoy talking to myself and recording myself and sharing what I have to share. So because we need to be able to share our passions without hesitation. And you are the right voice for that today. Many leaders need to use their voice to showcase the value that they have on themselves and also to the business. I wanted
As
to ask you, you mentioned something about how you started writing and how that writing became a voice for you. Can you talk to me a bit about how you ended up becoming a proposal writer?
So, like most people, I fell into this profession on accident. I think in over a decade of writing proposals, I've only met maybe 4 or 5 people who set out intentionally to become proposal writers, or the entry level title you'll often find for these roles is marketing coordinator. And so for me, I quit my mortgage job in Atlanta for love, took an 8 week contract position in Maryland, and 8 weeks has turned into $1 billion in contract wins and a 10-year career where I've been able to run internship programs, make major moves for our company, not just in terms of proposal writing, but also helping people understand that visibility is a part of the process when you get into things that are much more competitive. When there's maybe 5 or 6 firms nationally that have the capabilities to lead major programs
Mhm.
that are of national security importance, the competition is much more difficult. And so people go, oh, it's only 5 or 6 competitors. It's like, but if everything is apples to apples, it is not enough to differentiate. It's not enough to say, well, I'm a better apple. Sometimes you got to decide that what they need is an orange and help them understand that the orange is what's going to serve them better. And so when I say we don't differentiate, we elevate, that is what I mean. We're not trying to be one-to-one comparisons of other folks. We are trying to be the blueprint for what is next and what the future of our industry looks like.
You talked about visibility and also helping executives find their voices through writing. Can you talk to me a little bit about that, about how you help executive leadership people find their voice through writing or just find their voice through communication?
So what I tend to do is I tell people my favorite approach to this is not to little mermaid people and steal their voice and tell them, well, you should sound like this or you should move like that. Unless
Mhm.
it's something that's genuinely distracting and going to detract from the experience of people being able to hear what you're trying to convey, I'm not going to tell you don't do that. But if you're going to, maybe come and shove your hands in your pocket, I might say, hey, let's think about what message that sends. But generally, when it comes to helping people find their voice, I listen first. And so in listening, I'm able to understand what it is they're trying to articulate. And so then we refine the words that they use to express the same ideas. And so what I'm cautious to do, namely with writing, sometimes I will interview subject matter experts and we will talk through what are the questions the client is asking. And sometimes those questions are not in the form of actual questions. They're here are the requirements. Give us a proposal. Give us that includes resumes, past performance, different qualifications. And within those, they express the scope. And so you have to really understand, okay, what are they asking for truly? Because sometimes past performance means you're trustworthy. How do I express that I'm trustworthy? Like, and so that's the
Yeah.
stuff I try to bring out when I'm talking to folks. So maybe someone worked, a disaster like 9/11, but they never tell the story about how above and beyond their actual job, they worked with Home Depot or Lowe's to get money to fund and replace the community garden for small children at the local elementary school because that's something they lost. In the scheme
Yeah.
of something as large as 9/11, you're not thinking about the children's community garden, but that's the difference in hiring the right people. They understand the parameters of I cannot spend federal funds on this particular effort, but what I can do is navigate the relationships here on the ground in the community to make sure that I'm empathetic to the people who are most disadvantaged. And so
Yeah.
those are the things I get to bring to the storytelling process that they might not always see as an important element in their response.
Yeah. What's your belief? What's the power of storytelling?
The power of storytelling really is about shifting the narrative of what people think is possible. So part of my personal brand impact statement is that I want people to know that they are worthy
Mhm.
of success. That's number one. I want you to feel significant. I don't tell people that they should feel important because for me, importance implies that there is a competition or a ranking. Significance is consistent regardless of whether or not you're on your best day or your worst day. And the thing that I want people to do is live as though their dreams are unfolding, not just possible. And one of the things that I've had to do is shift the way I live because it's one thing for me to show up and support other people, but if I'm not showing how I'm living my best life, then I'm cutting the idea short of what representation looks like and what is possible. And so as
Yeah.
much as things like LinkedIn are, professional sort of spaces, I tend to also share some of my personal life. So you might get a picture of me on the weekend at the Derby with a few girlfriends or at a really great concert that I thought was an excellent experience because I want people to understand
Yeah.
that your wholeness as a professional is not limited to your job title or
Yeah.
how well you deliver on the things that are the scope of your job. It's also about joy.
Hmm. Yeah. And if there's any one thing I can tell anybody listening to this, if you're thinking of anything and you're doubting yourself about taking that next action, here is a challenge for you. Share your passion without hesitation. So, Unica, some people might be fearing or having imposter syndrome, and so they don't want to even share anything about their story. How do you help them overcome that kind of fear and for them to start embracing the power of storytelling and using that to position themselves?
Well, I will share my own story of how I have grown more comfortable talking about myself and how
Yeah.
I've taught other people to do it. I recognize that it is the thing that usually causes people like night sweat sort of level of terror sometimes to share their expertise, even if they've been at it for decades. And so I tell people to start small. So these can be informal, sort of loose conversations with your hairdresser. You go to the barbershop on the weekends, kind of practice bragging in spaces that are a little less intimidating. And I think that when you get the support and the positive feedback from the people who are in your community, it's much more comfortable to do something like post online and say, hey, I've been featured in Rolling Out, or, we just won a $575 million contract. Let's celebrate that together. Then it doesn't feel like bragging. It is, I tell people all the time, I said, it's not bragging if you can back it up. So if you can put it on your resume, you can speak about it publicly.
Let's talk about why a billion-dollar bid writer. I know as a proposal writer, there's many people who are in the proposal writing, and I want you to define this for them first, the term proposal writing. But those who are in the proposal writing,
Mm-hmm.
for you, you've been in this industry for a while, and that has led to something that you're now well known for, and you're using it very effectively. And it might come across to other people as bragging, for example, but that's the power of having a good story behind it. So can you tell us what a billion-dollar bid writer mean, and what does a proposal writing mean, so that people who want to get into this industry can go through that?
Oh,
Tell me.
I love this question. I want to make sure I'm tracking. The first part is explaining what does billion dollar bid writer mean, and then
Yeah.
what is proposal writer. So billion dollar bid writer, I think this actually ties back a little bit to your last question. When I came up with this moniker, I was probably kind of doing one of my weekly reflections where I realized, wait, I've hit $1 billion in wins in my career. It was also the point where I realized I should probably focus on making sure I get paid my worth. But when I realized I was a billion dollar bid writer, I said, oh, I should tell people this, but I was actually terrified. Like I paid somebody and we did the logo and I posted it and I was like, I don't know how people are going to receive this. Maybe they will think I'm arrogant. What I did was I said, okay, you got to step out on faith and not walk in fear. So I
Yeah.
posted it in and I asked people, which one of these 4 designs is your favorite? The
Hmm.
response to the content was so overwhelming. I got text messages from folks that knew me and was like, I love this $1 billion bid writer thing. How did you come up with that? And
Yeah.
so you'll find a lot more support than you expect. But $1 billion bid writer is not necessarily a title for myself as much as it is a system around how you accomplish the goal of becoming a $1 billion bid writer. And part of that is visibility. Visibility has helped me negotiate better salaries for myself at 20 and 30K sort of increases as I've moved throughout the industry. And so when I think about, explaining to people what is a proposal writer, in a very simple way, a proposal writer is the catalyst for communication between your company and your client. And so a proposal is ultimately a sales document. And so you've got to find a way to effectively sell your company to the client who is seeking your services. And so that work, in some ways, there's a lot of hats. It is not just writing and editing. It is being a graphic artist sometimes if you don't have a larger team. If you're a marketing department of one, you are the graphic artist. You're often the person doing the market research, figuring out what language the client prefers to use, and so many other sort of details. You're more or less a project manager for a document development.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a powerful way. Another way to put it in the aspect of adding value to the company is you're saying $1 billion bid writer, but the idea is that what can you do in your profession with your expertise to provide so much value to a company that you work for or to your own business and reach close to $1 billion. So that's a way to
Right.
say,
Right. Like this is how you shoot for the stars and say like, well, who's gonna tell you you're not a pro at what you do if you can make $1 billion in revenue for your company
yeah.
with your whether you're an accountant or fly an airplane, like what is it that you bring to the table that no one else can touch?
Regarding communications, I know that's why. So through your passion and through your experiences, you found something and you have created something that is going to help people. Tell me about Uniqueka Walcott Communication.
Okay, so this is my company. It is my baby. I I do writing, speaking, and moderating through this company. So most of my focus has been on writing thought leadership pieces, such as how to use AI for the thought leadership development process. So that's some of the work that I do. I speak about AI and the use of AI in the proposal development process, and that is included places like the Society of American Military Engineers Small Business Conference. And this is where things intersect a bit with my 9 to 5. And so it's, having those comfortable agreements in place about where the line is between my company and what they do. But also moderating. And I love moderating because it is the best way to elevate people's voices simultaneously and let the audience experience it in real time. There's nothing like watching people kind of go aha
Mhm.
or wow, and like to see their facial expressions and their body language shift. It is one of the best feelings. But I also like to joke, don't let cousin Pookie moderate your event. Because if you
Yeah.
spend, I don't know, $100,000 putting together this event, you've bought all these gorgeous banners, you've got seats, you've got tickets, all of the sleepless nights you've spent planning for someone to get on stage and ask double barrel questions or even be disrespectful enough to flirt with your guests in public. Like those are not the things you want somebody to do. You want somebody that's going to come to this place, be very professional. For me, moderating is not just asking questions. I spend time with each guest before we ever get on stage to understand their philosophy. And so that's
Yeah.
some work that I do through my communications company, in addition to teaching my personal brand and masterclass, which I adore doing because it feels more like ministry than it does work. And so it's one of my favorite things to do.
Yeah. And I'm sure people will benefit from both the communications company and also the masterclass that you mentioned. Maybe we can get into that later here. But
Okay.
regarding AI and regarding your expertise, from the time your teacher noticed your voice through writing, and now the technology has changed so much, the landscape has changed. Almost people are losing their voice. But I think you told me this. AI is maybe good at helping people write, but it can never replace your voice, your power of storytelling. Tell me about that. How are you using AI to help you with your writing proposals, maybe, or just to maintain your voice? How do you
Oh,
use it without losing your voice?
I love, love, love this question, Felix. Thank you. So I think a lot of people are very, very fearful of, oh, AI is going to steal my job, or, in this case, steal my voice.
Yeah,
You can obviously take, things like writing samples and give them to AI to imitate your voice, but I found that it has never been able to effectively replicate it. Ways
yeah,
that I use AI today include things like maybe I'm considering to, be on a conference stage and present an abstract. And I'm not quite sure which idea out of the four in my head will really resonate. So I might say, here are my four ideas. Here's the conference event. Here's the audience. A few prompts later, ChatGPT is saying, hey, I think these are this is the strongest one, and here's why. So you might use it a bit for analysis of your ideas. Or if you're stuck on coming up with an idea, you could always take and plug your resume or LinkedIn profile in and say, hey, based on my expertise demonstrated on my resume, what are two or three topics that I might consider for this particular event? Or from a writing place, maybe you just want to have somebody else do the acronym check for you. That's something you can do. That's a common and tedious task in proposal writing. If you've mentioned a term like AI, the first time you mention it, you need to say artificial intelligence in commas AI. But and that's a very simplistic example. I think AI is pretty ubiquitous, but there are
yeah,
terminologies in our government contract space that most people would not know. So if I said RFI, RFP, IDIQ, these words don't mean anything to people outside of the industry generally.
yeah,
And so those are the things you want to spell out. And so you can use AI to do a first pass of that. And it's not perfect, but it does a very good job of expediting the process. So now something that might have taken you 2 hours might take an hour and a half for you to QC. And so those
yeah,
are some of the ways you can use it. But also, I mean, AI could even be used from the perspective of competitive analysis. If you wanted to say, okay, here are my strengths, here are my weaknesses, or who are likely competitors for a
yeah,
particular opportunity, that's something you can use AI for in the GovCon space. And I don't think people always think about that. What I have found is that it is not as accurate as me having a conversation with humans. So when I go talk to my subject matter experts who are getting FaceTime with clients, who are in the rooms where decisions are happening, what AI spits out is maybe 60%, 70% on the best day accurate in comparison to what my experts give me.
yeah.
So it's an excellent starting place, but it is not a replacement.
I think that's a powerful tool for people to use to elevate their expertise, not to replace their expertise. I think that's the punchline there. Use it to advance what you already know and even make it more powerful. You always have to add it even after you use AI. Have
Perfect.
Yeah, yeah,
The human touch is required.
yeah, yeah. Human voice is required. Have you moderated a panel discussions about AI?
Yes, so a few recently. So in November of last year, I went to the Society of American Military Engineers Federal Small Business Conference. And this is the second year in a row I've been at this conference. And we talked
Yeah,
about this past year AI in the proposal development process. And we focused on lessons learned 1 year later. And so during that conference, one of the things that really came out of that conversation was that one of our panelists who represents the Department of Homeland Security said, look, I review these. I can tell when proposals are written by AI. Make sure you don't lose your voice. Make sure that it's always got a human thumbprint on the content. And so that's something I like to remind people is that that's not just something I'm saying. That is something that is coming from agencies that are front runners in the space of AI use for proposal developments and also proposal evaluation. So
yeah,
that's people aren't always thinking about, but it's really important. I have also moderated panels called a panel called Clean Up on Owl AI was another one I did last year, and I loved it because it was a conversation with people with a broad variety of expertise. We're talking folks that are human resources experts, people who are in the process of doing reviews for some of the FDA approvals for how we use AI and X-ray screening. And so it was such a brilliant conversation of who owns the data? Should we own the data? Should we be getting paid for this information and how it's used? How do we protect our privacy? And because I'm in a room, it's the Black Women in Data Conference. They also said, what do I teach my children about the future of AI? How do I prepare them for this future? And so it was such a rich conversation, so much so that one of the women who attended the session that morning walked over to me during the happy hour and clapped me down. She said, "You moderated that thing." And I tensed up a little bit because I was not prepared for that kind of energy. But it let me know that I delivered what needs to be said in the room. In fact, another attendee was nice enough to also give me a LinkedIn recommendation because he really thought that the way I elevated the conversation was extremely powerful.
When it comes to moderating a panel, even when it comes to being a speaker and you're about to go on stage, maybe there's hundreds of people. Even if there's 5 people in a room in a team meeting, most leaders are not prepared for this type of environment. Their voice, there is a lot of fear, maybe fear of what they might speak. So can you tell me, what do you do differently when you are moderating a panel versus when you are about to go on stage to speak? What do you do differently, and what advice do you have for people who want to find their voice and to continue to speak in this kind of environments?
When it comes to speaking, one of my pieces of advice might be a little bit counterintuitive. There is such a thing as over rehearsal. So you don't know what you might say the day of. It's important to have very clear talking points. I go through my slide deck maybe twice before I get on stage if it's not a new topic, so that I'm clear about the key points that I want to hit. And then I let the energy in the room flow. I watch people's body language, especially when we've got instances where there are multiple speakers, and really understand what resonates and who's in the room. And so when I prepare to speak, I prepare my slide deck. I also come with a mindset of openness, that if I feel that there's something I need to elaborate on further that I didn't plan on, I will do it. And I trust myself. I think that's the most important thing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Also, be mindful to slow down and breathe, because even though you've rehearsed this and thought about it 500 times, this is new to everyone else in the room. So you can take a pause, take a breath, and just let your idea breathe a moment. And so that's one of the things you can do as a speaker. Vary your vocal tone, your rate. Those are things that keep people interested. Use your body mindfully. Those are my speaking tips from a speaking standpoint, and how I practice. I sometimes practice in a mirror. For moderating, it's a very different animal, because although I want to highlight myself as an expert in the room who's capable of asking good questions, my moderation prep process is, let me spend time with each of the speakers who are on the stage, even if it's just a half-hour call. And then I also, if I can, get everybody together on one Zoom call so they can meet each other beforehand. It helps you understand the chemistry and the dynamics of the folks that you're about to encounter. What are they nervous about? Is someone really, uncomfortable and a little scared because they've got an accent? You want to make sure that you support them and show up. And if it means that as a moderator, I repeat what they said so the audience catches it, I do that. The other thing I do as a moderator is ask about the background. I've worn this hot pink suit a few places. I love it. But there was one time I went to an event and the wall behind me was orange. And you can't show up in this with an orange wall. It's a great way to people subconsciously very frustrated at trying to stare at you. It's like almost like sticking a flashlight in someone's eye and say, "Hey, listen to me, by the way."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No one's going to be comfortable an hour later. Whatever you said doesn't matter. They're stressed out.
Yeah. So what I like about being a moderator, especially if a topic that I like, the moderator is supposed to ask the questions, like what I'm doing now. Maybe I'm asking the questions.
Mm-hmm.
But the
And do it
topic is so interesting that I want to add my own aspect to the topic. So I find myself asking the question, asking the people the questions, they respond, and I add my voice to all the time. So I find myself on the other side of the panel and also as a moderator, and I found that to be helpful, but also to be mindful of it's their time to speak and not too much about the moderator. That's one thing I've caught myself doing when I tried doing this a few times. Have you run into that?
It took one of my mentors to encourage me to start speaking more about my own expertise as a moderator, because I'm so focused on elevating other folks' voices that I didn't tend to interject as much as I could have.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even in that practice, no one has ever said, "Oh, we didn't hear enough from you." That's never been the feedback I received. But it was my mentor who nudged me and said, it's okay for you to share expertise as a
Yeah.
moderator as well. It adds to the credibility that you're bringing to the conversation and why you're asking the questions you're asking. So
Yeah.
I love your insight here.
Yeah. And that, with that kind of mindset, that means the moderation or the discussion will have a very good energy because you are in it. And that's the value I saw in it. So I want to ask you, how do you define your personal brand and what problem does it solve exactly? Tell me.
This is a question that I've mulled over greatly. And originally I said, oh, I'm going to use my $1 billion bid writer mug. And I'll have to be very frank with you. My symbol is me. I look up in the morning every day. I've got to solve all the problems. I am, the buck stops and starts with me, whether I delegate it or I don't, whether I decide that my brand is called $1 billion bid writer or praise report, which is, the brand I lived under a decade ago, or it's Uniqueka Walcott Communications. The constant is myself. And so my confidence, my self leadership, those are all the critical pieces, regardless of what we call my brand.
Yeah, tell me more about your confidence. For anybody who might have like self-doubt and they want to overcome that, tell me about your confidence and how you can help them out.
For me, my confidence has come with intentional effort because it's something I have definitely struggled with. And I know
Mhm.
people look at me, you struggle with confidence, but you do all these crazy things. And I still sometimes doubt myself. Even, being featured in papers and whatever else, I might, have the luxury of experiencing. So for me, some of that has come with affirmations. So it's how I talk to myself about myself. This is back to storytelling. We love to talk about visibility and telling stories to other people. It's also very important that we're mindful of the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. And so for me, it has, shifted me from saying, hey, I'm worthy of success to myself. The sort of messages I give myself consistently. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll see where I occasionally will post affirmations and things kind of as an inspiration to other people to have that confidence. I'm a speaker who is sought after and people pay me well for my wisdom.
Yeah.
What is wrong with saying that to yourself?
Yep. Yep. Exactly. So can you tell me if somebody is feeling undervalued in any environment, what advice do you have for them to start using their own story to showcase their value?
First, I want to address the feeling of feeling undervalued. It is valid to feel that way. Don't let people talk you out of that feeling. What I want you to understand is that your value is not dictated by other people's perception. You have to own the yardstick. And I said this in our last interview. The yardstick
Yeah.
is to own, take it back. Number one. Number two, decide that you don't get to soak and feel sorry for yourself. No one's rolling out the red carpet. That's okay. You get to build a brand for yourself that is outside of your job title. You get to have a life for yourself outside of your job title. One of the best things you can do is set boundaries for yourself because a lot of times when we're feeling undervalued, it's because we're overgiving.
Yeah. Overgiving. Can you
So
expand on that? What does overgiving mean?
so generally speaking, we all get a job, description, and sometimes it says, additional responsibilities as assigned. This is where you get to be judicious and decline some of those additional responsibilities. Or if you're a high performer, the tendency is usually not that anyone's asked you to do the 12 extra activities you've taken on and being on whichever committee or proposing whichever idea. Sometimes it's about you deciding that you don't have to operate in the spirit of look at me, let me do all the things so people can recognize I'm wonderful. What you'll understand when you discover you're undervalued is they know you're valuable. They appreciate everything you do. But if you're going to do it for free, why would they pay you?
Yeah.
So
What about high achievers? They think they're doing everything they can, but in some rooms, they don't feel seen. They are doing everything they can, but in some rooms, they don't feel seen. How do they feel seen in those rooms?
I think you have to recognize when you're in a room that's too small for you or no longer fit for you and leave.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
number one. But also, I don't say that as a knee jerk immediately. The response is to leave. Sometimes it's first off, getting to know the people in the room and stop making it about you. Learn about what motivates them, what is important to them, what do they need, how they need you to show up, not how you want to show up. That is something that I've had to learn through feedback from my peers and my supervisors. And they go, we love you, you're great at this, but what we really need from you is this for the team. And so that has resulted in me doing things like even recently, I requested promotion, got feedback. None of it was about my performance. It was about here's the state of the organization. And so, based on that information, I said, I respect what you have shared with me. I don't think now is the appropriate time, but here's the information that I'll provide in that request. You guys let me know when it's appropriate. And so then you're not sitting around waiting or debating your value. They didn't give you any feedback that said, hey, you aren't delivering on the results. You've got excellent and strong, reviews the last few years. That's not the problem. The problem is where the organization is. And when you understand that you are a leader in an organization, you take your hat off of me, pick me. I deserve this. I'm entitled to this. I've earned this. And you recognize that your role is to serve. And when you
Yeah.
understand, you got to show up in a spirit and mindset of service. You pivot accordingly and say, okay, well, here's what I can do to show up for the organization currently. I trust my leaders will show up for me when the time is right.
Yeah. You know, most people might be feeling like it's the job or like it's about the environment, they're not being seen.
Mm-hmm.
But what I'm hearing from you is also the actual issue sometimes is about how people see themselves, how people see what value they bring. And as long as they are undermining that aspect of themselves, they will always see themselves as not being seen sometimes. And you
Yeah.
are a good, so I hope I summarize that well.
No, that was perfect. Like it is, sometimes you get hung up on titles. And I feel like, especially as millennials, we were told if you go to college, you get good grades, then you will get a good job and, get a cute house in the suburbs with a nice spouse.
Yeah,
And for most of us, that's not how the story unfolded, or
yeah.
it took longer than we expected. And
Hmm.
I think that that's the lesson that I had to learn from my own personal experience. Graduate high school, done all the things right. My next step didn't look like what I expected it to. Same when I finished college. And so it's and those building blocks that you understand that nobody owes you anything, but you owe it to
Yeah,
yourself to build a life you enjoy.
yeah, yeah. So I know you are speaking from experience, and from our last conversations in the previous podcast last year, we talked about this, but we never dove deeper into this. But I think it's a critical aspect of this show, your leadership brand, because most people feel this way, but they don't have a voice yet. They want to hear other people who have overcome those things. So for you, there was an environment, and you use your experience and the way you value yourself to create your brand. And through that process, you gain the courage to be able to experience life in a different way. So what do you have to tell people who are feeling stuck in this kind of environment? Maybe it's a toxic environment. Maybe it's an environment where they don't feel valued, or they are overlooked or underutilized, or even when questioning their value. Can you tell me what advice would you give them?
The first piece of advice I would give them is to give their self grace. Number one,
Yeah,
it is enough to feel like you're in a space where you're undervalued and feeling like you've got to, do cartwheels and 500 different sort of things to be seen. Sometimes that's not the problem. Sometimes the problem is some of us are addicted to success and to titles and achievements. And so you've got to make space to recognize that your job title is not your identity. And that's not work that happens overnight with a couple affirmations in the mirror. That takes deep sort of soul work and helping you understand that whether I got X or Y job title or this much money in the bank, I'm still worthy and a deserving person. And I think that you have to then center yourself on the things you can control.
yeah,
Like everybody wants to be CEO, and there's 100 of you. Only one person's getting that spot.
yeah,
Define yourself on that. There's 99 people who are disappointed forever.
yeah.
So
So
find in your personal life and the things that are real.
yeah, yeah. So that brings me to this next powerful question. What role did faith, community, internal clarity help you overcome the experience that you had initially?
Whew. Faith was everything. Let's start there. Like believing that I could overcome the
Yeah,
situation that I was in was step one, because then you don't make any actions or moves. You don't reach out to community to request prayer. You don't reach out to your community to say, hey, I'm really struggling with this. And that's also difficult if outwardly you were seen as this superpower person that's got it all figured out. Like you've got to have the audacity to be vulnerable. And so in reaching out to my close knit community, they rallied behind me and showed me support that I don't know that I fully grasped or appreciated until I reached out, because I didn't know that was what was available to me. So I'll be honest, I feel like in some ways, hosting my previous podcast called Career Conversations, where I helped other people talk up and raise their voice about who they are outside of their job title, was a wonderful mirror, because we'd have these live, wonderful interviews that I would share with people, but then we turned the camera off for recording and we would chit chat behind the scenes. And I can't tell you how many times the conversations were extremely revelatory and helping me do more internal work. And so as much
yeah,
as I was focused on giving to my community, people gave back to me far more than I can ever begin to repay. So that was a lot of how the internal clarity happened, was me having these wonderful people who were mirrors
yeah,
and asked me tough questions, or pose questions that I just hadn't considered about life. You know, these are people that were sometimes early career and sometimes 77 and retired.
yeah,
And that was the beauty in that experience.
yeah. And part of internal clarity comes with people needing mentorship, people needing coaching, people need somebody to show them, somebody who has done it. So when somebody is feeling overlooked or feeling all those unseen or invisible, what's one way we can help them to find the right mentors?
Oh, finding the
And
right,
and mostly for them to have the courage to seek mentorship or coaching.
having the courage to seek mentorship or coaching is an absolutely bold move, especially when you're feeling undervalued and unseen, because you're like, well, is this person also going to undermine me? Especially if they're a coach and you've paid them. That can be really stressful. I think that you've got to have the audacity just to take one more leap of faith when
Yeah,
it comes to finding a mentor or coach. You need to find somebody that aligns with your values, but also has the right vocabulary to challenge your belief system,
yeah,
because that is what's going to shift you from overlooked and sad and upset and overlooked to powerful, inspirational,
yeah.
attractive. Good energy is magnetic, but you
Hmm.
can't tap into that when you're feeling invisible.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And one thing there, I think part of it, I think you mentioned like you have to be bold or you have to have to find the courage to do it. Part of it is just leading yourself. So self-leadership is a critical aspect of getting out there and finding the right type of help without hesitation.
Yes. And I think the other thing is, like, if you find that somebody's not a good fit for mentorship or coaching, it's okay to end that relationship. I think
Yeah,
that sometimes think, well, this person said they would be my mentor for the next 6 months. Well, if it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. And it's really a respectful thing to honor their time and yours as a limited resource and say,
yeah,
hey, no, I thought this would be a great fit. It's not quite what I was thinking. Let's move on.
yeah,
That's okay.
yeah. One thing that stops people from even being on social media, sharing their passion, what is in their mind, telling their story is oversharing. Tell me about oversharing. How can people overcome the idea that telling their story or sharing their wins, their losses isn't oversharing?
Well, yeah, oversharing is definitely something that is a challenging thing to navigate. I find that I try to ask myself a few questions. One of them is, would I be embarrassed if my grandmother found this out? Then perhaps that's not something you want to share. The other thing I ask is it true? Because
Yeah,
what you don't want to do is inflate your capabilities or your
yeah,
experience for folks. That is also a very risky line to toe. So, is it embarrassing? Is it factual? And is it timely? Perhaps, if the news you've got, is huge and major, not to say you have to shrink yourself in the face of good news, but if we were faced with some major national tragedy, maybe now it's not the time to brag about, the major win you got. Maybe you save it till tomorrow or next week. And I think those combinations of those three things really set the bar for avoiding oversharing. The rest of it, you just let it come out in the wash and learn.
Yeah, yeah, and especially for aspiring leaders who want to step up to the big corporate roles, there's always hesitation to step up to those leadership roles, hesitation to tell their story. I learned last week that actually most leaders need to have at least 5 types of stories prepared and ready in their back pocket to be able to share it. And there is like origin story, there's a visual story, there is a list of stories that leaders need to have ready to be able to engage depending on the environment, depending on the situation. Do you have a leadership story that you use all the time?
I have a few. I think that probably my favorite leadership story is about creating an internship program because I had
Mhm.
5 of those in college for myself. And so I know a lot of leaders, especially as they get more senior, tend to be intimidated by the younger folks. I love them. And so I go out
Mhm.
of my way to create opportunities for them. And so this opportunity for me to create this program actually came to me because someone got let go. And they said, hey, so and so got let go, and we've got interns coming in 2 weeks. Would you mind running this? So I had 2 weeks to put together an entire program, hop on a plane, and head from the East Coast to the West Coast to greet 3 interns. And it was the most amazing experience ever to be able to nurture these young people. So from week one, they showed up. One of them showed up in a romper, shorts. It would have been great if he was at the mall. And in that instant, as a leader, I had to make a decision. Do I embarrass this young woman to send her home because she's also late? Or do I help her understand that she is welcome in our industry, but here's how we operate? And so
Yeah.
I led her over to the desk. I said, hey, have a seat here and kind of keep it low key. I said, your dress is not exactly the thing we would normally wear, but I don't think it's going to
Mm.
be a distraction if you don't, go hang out in the kitchen for too long. And let's get through today. And we'll go forward and we'll talk about the dress code. We'll help you understand the lingo. She turned out to be one of my best, most productive interns that year. Now, imagine if I'd taken that day and not expressed, her value beyond her appearance is important to
Yes.
me.
Yeah. Yeah.
What would we have done? You
Yeah.
know, and one of the best pieces of feedback, maybe it was 2 weeks in, her father is also in the industry we work in. He sent
Hmm.
my CMO an email. He said, he's been in the industry at this point 25, 30 years. He says, this is one of the best internship programs I've ever heard of. He said, I've been trying to explain to my daughter, who's a college sophomore, what I do for a living. 2 weeks in, she understands fully, finally. And I said,
Yeah.
well, my job is done because what I don't want to do is have my interns get in a room with the CEO, which is a strong possibility the way I've designed this program for them to do their capstone presentation and share about their experience. And I invited the executive leadership team, but I didn't want them to walk by and he says, Keelan, tell me what an RFP is. And she's 3 weeks in and she doesn't know what an RFP is, but that's the core part of our job. I'm not doing
Yeah.
my job then. So that's one of my favorite leadership stories I tell because it's a combination of education and empathy, which are
Yeah.
two core things that I bring to the table as a leader.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so proud of this show, and that's why I named it Your Leadership Brand. Your Leadership Brand. Every guest comes in and they tell stories. They tell me their experience. They tell me how they help people. They tell me what problems they are solving. They tell me, they tell the audience what advice they have and how the audience learn from them. There's many people in the audience watching this and they can see themselves in you. They can see themselves in all the guests. So I think your leadership brand is very important. So tell me, why do you think leaders and especially mid-level professionals need to embrace their leadership brand?
I'll start with a story. I've got a business buddy,
Yeah.
loves to take jabs at me because I say that effective leaders need to be empathetic. And she has posted almost weekly since I said that and said, leaders don't need to be empathetic. Why would they do that? That's a losing strategy. I don't tend to respond there, but she and I have talked about it privately, and I think that it's important to have empathy. Should your entire team maybe be a group of bleeding heart people? No, there's got to be somebody that lays down the hammer. But I also like to remind people that empathy does not mean that you lack integrity or that you lack boundaries. Empathy is a willingness to see both sides of a situation, offer maybe a little bit extra grace, understand the situation more fully, but also giving people the opportunity that if they don't make correction of the behavior, the thing that they are lacking in terms of growth and delivery, then you've given them an opportunity to correct. When you invite them to leave, you've done your job.
Yeah.
So I think that people are sometimes confused about what empathy means or that it's an overly emotional involvement. But for me, it's also a superpower. My ability to be empathetic is how I've won because what I'm not only doing when I speak to my SMEs about what their expertise is and developing RFP responses, I'm also inviting all of us together to put ourselves in the shoes of our clients. So on paper, that might say we need a bridge fixed. But why does this bridge need to be fixed? It needs to be fixed because there's school buses that travel over this main arterial roadway every single day, and it's not safe for our kids to get to school on. What happens when the front page news is that 30 children died because a bridge collapsed with a school bus on it? Like that's the work that I'm doing. That's the work that keeps government agencies and officials awake at night. Those are the problems we're solving. So that's why my leadership style I think works for me and why it's my superpower.
Kim Scott has a book called Radical Candor, and I like how she approaches this topic around empathy or the connection between a leader and individual contributor or somebody that reports to you. And usually people hesitate on challenging people or because they might feel like they might make them not feel well, for example, or some leaders are just upfront and they just keep hammering on the employees without really connecting. So Kim Scott says, care personally and challenge directly. Care personally and challenge directly. At least show the connection that you understand whatever that problem is, but also tell them what is the consequence of that and what improvement is needed in a straightforward way so that they understand. So I like how Kim Scott addresses this point about empathy in a professional environment.
I'll have to take a look at that book. That sounds like a great read. I think for me, the
Yeah.
seed of empathy and leadership were planted when I was back in high school reading John C. Maxwell's Developing the Leader Within, where he says people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So I relate deeply to reading and having those kind of influences that grow you as a leader.
Yeah. Caring, knowing people knowing how much you care, people knowing how much you make them feel and them remembering that all the time or feeling that all the time. That's what builds trust and being able to, as a leader, taking people together to a common vision.
Yeah.
So this next question, I think we've talked about it a bit, we've hinted on it, but now we want to formalize it. Do you have a personal brand symbol, and how do you use it every day in your life?
I I'm my brand symbol. Every day I get up and I encourage myself. I set the direction and tone for the day and the way I interact with people and how I make them feel. I give myself grace when I fall short, but also show up consistently. And I think those are the best things you can do. And so I think we did touch on this a bit about, a brand symbol and for me, a lot of times they have been outward and external things. And the way that I've come to being myself is because I've had to do so much internal work lately that I realized that the one constant in everything that I do is me. I can control my attitude. I can control whether or not I go to the gym as frequently as I've committed to myself. I can control how I respond to people who've missed deadlines internally. Like all that is up to me. And so as much as I'd love to seek comfort in, my hot mug of tea or coffee or good music, like the constant is me, I and my faith. Those two things together is how I get through life.
Mm-hmm. So your personal brand symbol is
Myself, me.
yourself, is you. Okay, got it. I think you are the second person to actually the third person to answer this question that way.
Oh, really?
One guy from Ghana, he responded the same way. His tagline is greatness in you. So when you see him, that's his symbol. When you
I,
see him, that's his symbol. And then last week, the other guy I interviewed, he's around, do things consistently, do things consistently. And so when you see him do all these things, think about yourself.
ah,
So same way how you've answered. I think you've touched on this. How do you use it every day in your life, also in your professional environment, especially in proposal writing? There is many people who are doing proposal writing, and they are not as successful as you in doing this. So how do you use your personal brand symbol every day in your life, especially in professional environment?
I like this question. So we talked about my symbol being myself. And so it's really about how I show up. And so there's an emphasis on three areas. What do I want people to know in my presence? How do I want them to feel? And what do I want them to do? And so kind of back to my impact statement, knowing that you are valuable, that you're worthy of success is important. Doing your best, I do my best. I want other people to do their best. And so sometimes the way I show up is not necessarily to lay down the axe and go, dude, you 3 days late, where you been? But you
Mhm.
to empathize and ask questions and say, how can I support you in being successful? This is the same way I deal with my interns. I would say to them each week, I said, how can I help you be successful this week? That was always the question we had in our weekly check-in conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So, so people feel safe, people feel supported. And so then doing is, in my workplace, doing the things that I promised I would do people on time, or having the decency to communicate delays or challenges that I'm facing, breaking down silos between people. Maybe two people don't see eye to eye on how something should be executed. So maybe they can't even hear each other because they're so frustrated with each other. I pick the phone up and I have a call and I talk to Jim and I say, Jim, okay, here's the challenge we're faced with. Here's what we would like to do. Some of the team members think that we should take this approach. They give me their perspective, their impression of what's best. I might call two or three other people who might have different perspectives, get that information and kind of collate it and say, hey, based on the feedback from the team, I think this is the best course of action. But also in saying that, empathize with everything that everyone has expressed and explain to them why I, as an expert, have come to this conclusion, and that it's
Yeah.
not me just making up some stuff. It's based on research or a decade of experience and what I've seen shift in the marketplace. So that but in being empathetic and having those one-to-one relationships, I foster that trust. They feel safe.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
can get them to do what they need so that we can meet our deadline.
Yeah. And I think this is another aspect where your personal brand symbol comes in, and your brand and your expertise and your experience comes in. A lot of people don't know about the government contracts, and
Yeah.
a lot of people apply for government contracts, but they don't get it. But you've been able to deliver and provide this many number of government contracts, adding up to $1 billion. So what do you have to say for people who are seeking government contracts, or for people who are not winning these contracts, but they still keep trying and trying? Can you tell me, how do you help them, or what message do you have for them so that they never give up?
Well, number one, obviously don't give up. But I think the other thing is that I want people to understand that passion is not a substitute for compliance. I think a
Mm,
lot of people approach this with like, well, I'm the best and I'm the most incredible, me, me, me. Put your client first. That's who you talk about, how you can serve. Number two, RFPs are extremely prescriptive documents. If they say check box 3 on page 4 and you missed it, it's going in the trash. And so that's why I tell people that passion is not a substitute for compliance, because you can write the most amazing document, but if you miss the check box on this, you can't even be in the competition to win. It's disqualified. So that's sort of step one, is making sure that you've got a very clear understanding of exactly what they've asked you to provide. Do not give extra information. If they did not ask for 5 past performance examples, don't give them 5 if they only want 4. Like,
yeah.
those are things you have to be really, really considerate of. And I know it might seem like you're doing more to give that extra information, but these are people who are often just as time pressed for you, if not as you are, if not more. They don't want to read extra pages of content to come to the conclusion. So conciseness is your friend, as well
Yeah.
as clients. The other thing I like to tell people is to really have an honest conversation with yourself.
Yeah.
Do I
Yeah.
really meet the qualifications that they have indicated are required to be an acceptable and responsive bidder?
Yeah.
You know,
So yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so if you've been in business, for 2 years and you've only done this once, don't inflate that experience. It does more harm than good because then they can't trust you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of small businesses or small contractors or small entrepreneurs that are seeking this contract. So then they are not even aware of this. And I can see your social media, so you're always sharing these things, which is good for awareness.
I love sharing it because although have grown in my career and worked at much larger companies in recent years, the reason that I have this profession is because a small business took a bet on me. So they're always going to be center of heart for me in terms of how I show up.
So, in your profession, I think a lot of things are measurable. You close a contract, you close a proposal writing, you are quantifying that. That has a value to it. That's how you're able to quantify up to 1 billion, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But other professions that they don't see it that way. Some people's job is indirectly connected to the $1 billion bid that you're mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
What can we tell the people whose outcome is not easily quantifiable? It's quantifiable if they take some time to it, but whose outcome is not easily quantifiable and seen. What can we tell them?
I will argue that some people may argue that the work I do isn't easily quantifiable because you'll often see that the people who are celebrated are the project managers who win this. But I
Yeah,
recognize my own value in this, and my engagement is that if I don't keep deadlines moving, like, so you have to kind of take a zoom out and go, would what happened be possible if I didn't show up and my contributions were removed? And I think
yeah,
in that way you have to say that is just as much my $1 billion win as it is the project manager's $1 billion win,
yeah,
or the contracts manager's $1 billion. Like, and so when you understand that you're part of a team, you
yeah,
understand that your win is everyone else's win too.
yeah. I like that. And that's what most professionals don't get. They're part of a project, they're part of a mission. That mission is successful, but they don't claim their contributions towards that mission's success. And that's where people fall short. You ask them, what have you contributed? They say they worked on a project, but they can't put a value to it. But the project was actually that much value. So I
Mm-hmm.
like I like I like your response on that. So regarding your legacy, what do you want to leave in this world before let's say you go many years ahead? Not too soon, but many years.
You know, this is such a hard question because I don't know that as somebody who's building a legacy, I get the right to define that.
Yeah,
I think that comes with the people that I impacted. It is my prayer that as a result of people's interactions with me, they take bigger leaps, that they take bigger chances and bigger risk and don't feel shameful about it. Like that if I could impart that to people, like, don't be ashamed of your success. And that's something that a lot of us who might be high achieving, who maybe come from families that didn't have as much growing up, it is easy to have a sense of shame about your success, or a sense of hiding because you don't want to feel braggadocious. But I want people to recognize that there's so much power in representation, that you are doing a disservice to your community by not speaking up about your success and also sharing not just your successes, but also your failures. And so you'll see me
yeah,
make jokes about where I made a mistake or screwed something up because I think that people need to understand that just because you made a mistake does not mean you are failing.
yeah, yeah. I like that. You know, few people in the personal branding industry who are expert in this, they are telling it in a very good way, not sharing your wins, not sharing your losses, not sharing your personal stories, or things that you're going through is actually a selfish mindset, because somebody just like you might be out there waiting to hear that kind of experience. And actually, that's what gets them out of the couch or out of their minds to
Mm-hmm.
step up and rise. So I like how people frame it, about how people frame, they make you feel guilty so that you can start doing more. But it's actually a good way to show the trade-offs, the advantages and disadvantages. So what's your dream for the future of your personal brand, and especially for your communications platform?
I love this question, and it also scares me. Okay, so I'm sometimes a little scared to share this because it's big, it's audacious, and maybe from some people's perspective, not aligned with what I do today. But in trusting God with my life and not getting exactly what I thought I wanted, I have
Mm-hmm.
in a far better position than I could imagine. So the capability to win $1 billion in bids is a skill that I can take and translate into things like writing grants to found, community-based sort of center where there's a radio and television station where we can collaborate with small business owners who are trying to get their voice and their brand out to the market that don't have a big, budget to do these sort of things, and partner with local young folks in the community who need skills that are bankable. And so that is really my dream, is to be able to create an incubator sort of program where those two things connect and to replicate that program globally. That is what I would love to do. And so for me today, this is me taking step one and creating Uniqueka Walcott Communications and connecting with executives, understanding what they need, what language they use to describe their problems, so that when I have, my boatload of mentees and people that I've connected with in the community who are ready to learn and support with other professionals at the helm, we can make that happen and be effective in the way we communicate with each other. And so
Yeah.
that's my dream. And it's been my dream since college, so much so that I remember standing outside of Bishop Hall at Fort Valley State University. And I told God, I said, if God, if you'll let me graduate and get this degree, I will take what I learned and honor you with it.
Yeah.
And so when I said earlier that my master class feels like more ministry, like I meant it, because that's where my heart is.
Yeah. That's a promise. A promise to God is a promise for to yourself for your success.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Can you touch on your masterclass a bit? I know you mentioned it earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a personal branding masterclass that I host live and will release digitally. But right now, I'm enjoying the opportunity to be in rooms with women and help them understand the benefits of, getting their personal brand developed, getting paid your worth, stepping into leadership. And this is one I remind people, it's not always about title. It's
Yeah.
about, it helps people negotiate like a pro, because if people understand that you are the Lamborghini of professionals in your space before you ever
Mm-hmm.
step foot into the interview, they're not going to offer you beater car, money or opportunities in terms of your growth. And so
Mm-hmm.
the other thing you get to do is attract sponsors and advocates. And I've done this consistently where people have reached out to me and said, hey, I heard about this event. I think you'd be an excellent addition to the panel. I think you'd be an excellent addition to this opportunity. Are you open? Are you available? Here's the budget. And so
Yeah.
that's what I want people to be able to create for themselves. And so for me, that has been, getting featured and rolling out, being identified as a public figure via Google, and all these really cool things that we've talked about, such as moderating panels about AI, which I care about deeply because it's a conversation that I almost exited.
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
like, I don't think I belong in this conversation. I'm not a scientist. And if it wasn't for people elevating their voices like Dr. Joy Balamwini, I wouldn't have understood. She said, if you have a face, you have a place in this conversation. And that changed everything for me, down to even
Mm.
peers in my space coming to me and saying, well, Uniqueka, why are you talking about AI? I thought you were anti-AI. I thought you
Yeah.
hated AI. And one of the things I teach in my master class is that choose kindness, set boundaries, change your mind. Those are the road rules to how we navigate developing a personal brand. And so I said to her, thank you for that feedback. That's really important, because if you have that impression, you've come to me, there's got to be 100 more people that feel the same way. And so this
Yeah.
is an opportunity for me to communicate the shift and why
Yeah.
I'm talking about AI and how I'm talking about it. Because If I'm not in the room asking the right questions, are we actually considering some of the harm that's being done to people who are not represented?
Yeah, powerful. I think anybody going through that masterclass will greatly benefit. Personal branding, leadership aspect, and AI technology, which most people are still hesitant on getting on. So a class like that will maybe convince them otherwise. Yeah. Are
Yeah.
you ready for rapid fire questions?
Let's go.
All right, let's go. Rapid fire questions here. Biggest myth about leadership.
Biggest myth about leadership is you need a title to be a leader. That is false.
Yeah, that's very true. One book every business leader should read.
Ooh, this is a good one. I'm going to say Set Boundaries, Find Peace by Nedra Tawwab. It's not actually a business book, but it's
Mhm.
about having those radical candor sort of conversations, and not just with your business folks, but also with your family and friends.
Yeah,
That's what you can read.
I'll have to look into it. Morning routine or a night owl?
I think that fluctuates just because of how my work flows. Sometimes I can work 80-hour work weeks, and so I have to be a night owl involuntarily. And
Yeah.
sometimes I have to get up at 4 or 5 a.m. to put the finishing touches on something that's due at 4 p.m.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it fluctuates. I can't say truly one or the other, but I think
Okay.
my husband will tell you that I'm a morning person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing people always get wrong about you.
Ooh, people generally think I'm kind of mean, which is funny. One of my best friends in middle school, even so, this is not like a new thing as an adult, or this is my middle school bestie said, I used to be scared to talk to you. I thought you were mean, and then I got to know you. She's like, you're one of the sweetest people I've ever met. So I think maybe sometimes the bigness of the way I do life is intimidating to folks, but like I'm pretty welcoming, is
Yeah.
what you soon discover.
Yeah. Biggest myth about personal branding.
The biggest myth about personal branding is that personal branding is a website or a dope photo shoot. And this is to quote one of my guests on my show. And I was like, amen. People think that a brand is a photo shoot. They think it's a gorgeous website and colors and logos. If you strip all that back, there's still you that people have to reckon with. And if you aren't in alignment with who you represent yourself to be, if the aesthetic is aspirational, it falls apart quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. My last guest answered this way. It's not about having a huge following also. So
Amen to that.
yeah. If if you weren't in this industry, what would it be?
If I wasn't in this industry, I would own radio and television stations. That's the goal.
Yeah. Because
Yeah.
that's how you started. Yeah, I see you have degree in communications and you've worked in media and now you have the communications company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, as a kid, my mom said I was 5 years old and I asked people, do you understand? Like, so communication is just a part of like who I am as a person. I used to watch the news and watch the tickers and ask all kinds of questions as like a little kid who could probably barely read. Mom, what does the stock ticker mean? And I used to watch with such admiration, even growing up in my later years in Atlanta. A lot of the news reporters and broadcasters look like me. And so for me, it was just like, this is what you got to do with life. This is it. I mean, even at a point, I wanted to be a war reporter. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's how much I love like media. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Good.
I grew up like watching like the Gulf War coverage, and I was like, wow, that is amazing. This woman is like on the back of a truck, like in the middle of a war zone, like holding it down. Like I love it. So much so that even in college, I got the opportunity to log video for CNN's Black in America. Like one of my like coolest tasks I've gotten to do to date, and I just love media.
Yeah. There you go. That's your next move. If
We'll see. If the opportunity has to come.
yeah,
I, I'll do my best to be prepared.
if leadership had a soundtrack, what would your theme song be? If leadership had a soundtrack, what would your theme song be?
If leadership had a soundtrack, All right, first thing came to mind was Kendrick Lamar. They not like us.
From the Super Bowl, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was the first song that came to mind. I was like, that feels like it fits. I was gonna say living my life like it's golden, but leadership is hard sometimes, and nobody
Yeah.
talks about it. You know, from the standpoint, oh, it's always, oh, you got the fancy title and the nice office. It's like, but also sometimes you are heartbroken about the things you have to say to people,
Yeah.
or torn because the direction that you've got at the executive level is not the one that you are aligned with, but it's the one you've got to execute. Nobody.
Why Kendrick Lamar's song?
I think that it's relevant and timely, and I like this song because also it kind of just represents the divide. And I hate to say divide because it's not a word you'd want to use with leadership, but there are people that think that leadership is is strictly for people that are like them.
Yeah.
And and it's not. Leadership is you lead everybody and you respect everybody's humanity in the way that you
Hmm.
show up. And so that's why I chose They Not Like Us, because real leaders understand the value in leading everybody.
Yeah. I like it too. And I think he used his platform to showcase so many areas where people are divided.
Hmm.
And he called out almost every single aspect of what anybody could think about in that kind of society. And
Right.
when leaders use their platform to elevate others, to point out the obvious that people are ignoring, I think that's powerful. So that's a good song choice.
Thanks. Thanks.
What's next for you? Big adventures do you have coming up?
You know, I don't have any sort of big adventures on the horizon. I take that back. I've always got adventures on the horizon. It's like which one's going to root and sprout first is probably the question of the day. The one that I am working on currently is developing a customized GPT, and I'm excited
Hmm.
about it. I think it'll be critical in helping people grow their brands.
That's a powerful one. I think every leader, every personal branding industry that you know, or any personal branding expert organization, even companies, they are training their AIs so that their employees can use it in their voice and to represent their company. So I think that's one aspect where you are going with that.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. The other thing that I'm creating that I'm particularly excited about is creating a local community of business leaders. And so it's called the Blueprint Collective. And so the idea is that a lot of us are first or one of a few in this space. And so we get to become a community for each other to navigate opportunities for referral, but also the highs and lows of business leadership. And so that's something that I'm cultivating and looking forward to launching this summer. And that is inspired by one of my mentors and business coaches.
Very good. We talked about mentors earlier, so you are very powerful mentors.
Yes, I have amazing people in my life, and I'm so grateful for the people God sends me.
Yeah. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Trust yourself.
Very true. Trust yourself and make the move and do it anyway and keep going.
Yeah, trust yourself. Do it scared.
What's
So
the biggest what's the biggest risk you've ever taken?
the biggest risk was probably quitting my suddenly permanent mortgage job. So I worked in mortgage for 3 years before I became a proposal writer. And in those 3 years, I had two different companies, three different offices, and four different roles. And for 18 months of those 3 years, I was a contract employee. So imagine finally getting a decent job, and quitting it and moving to another state to take another temporary job that you don't know if you're going to have in 8 weeks. So I bet on myself, and that has been 8 weeks has turned into 10 years and $1 billion in wins. That
Yep,
was the biggest and best risk I've taken.
yep, and that's powerful because you trusted yourself. You say that that's the best advice you gave from one of your mentors, right? And that's what you're still using, the
Trust
tool.
yourself.
Yeah. So Unica, if somebody is listening to this and they are feeling overlooked, underutilized, invisible, and even questioning their sense of purpose. They are in a professional environment, high achievers, but they still feel stuck. with your personal branding background, your expertise in communications and people finding their voice, and also with your experience across a few industries and your attendance in these conferences where you are listening from other leaders and learning from them, what advice do you have for this kind of person watching this right now?
The first thing I want to do is tell them to affirm themselves. Looking for anything external is always a risk because you can't promise that. You can keep your promises to yourself. That's the first thing I want to tell you. The second thing is if you do feel like you actually need to move, don't wait for the next perfect opportunity. Take a 10% better leap. It's going to make a difference in how you grow and evolve. Staying in a place that's not healthy for you for too long will linger far longer than you expect. So maybe you stayed someplace, 2 years too long. You might spend 2 years healing emotionally from that experience. Move on before it's perfect. Because I know a lot of times you can get in a place where you feel shrunken and you're like, well, what if I get it wrong? It's okay if you get it wrong because now you get to make another decision with more data. And
Yeah,
and so that's what you have to be mindful of. It doesn't have to be perfect next move. It just needs to be better. And if it was 5% better or 25% better, that is progress worth celebrating. The
yeah,
third thing I would ask you to ask yourself is, what is the motivation behind the desire that's being unmet? Because sometimes our sense of invisibility is because we are chasing the goal that our parents have set for us or that our family has set for us. Well, you're supposed to be a CMO by now. What are you doing with your life?
yeah,
Are you actually satisfied with your life?
yeah, yeah,
Like,
I agree.
take back your yardstick.
Yeah. And yeah, so people should just measure success in their own terms, right? That's what you're referring to that. And my previous guest also talked about the people who are feeling success, but on the inside they are stressed. So he called them stressful.
Yes, it's stressful.
Uh,
I cackled about that. I said, "Ooh, that's a good term
yeah.
to borrow." Is
So it's about you defining your own level of success and being happy with that. Yeah. One other thing that people wait too long for is waiting for the next promotion or waiting or through promises that they haven't even followed through. Like you, for example, you said you requested for a promotion and you got your answer. So it's all about knowing that versus waiting, sitting and waiting, thinking that it might come. And next time I know you're going to ask again. Yeah, when is it? And next time you're going to ask again. So then it becomes a pattern of keep waiting, waiting. Then it's easier for you to decide
when it's time.
where you are valued. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that was a powerful move that you're making there. And I think many people will benefit from that advice. You know, if anybody is watching this right now and they're not loving their voice, what do you tell them? Like how I went and asked this speaker, hey, how can I love my voice? I know what they told me, but what will you tell them?
I would first want to ask what they don't love about their voice. Like your voice is a part of you. It's God's fingerprint for expression. I think the first thing you have to do to decide you love your voice is to honor your truth. So
Yeah,
some people may not like their voice because they're not really saying what they mean or how they feel. That's what I've generally discovered. And so that's step one. I think the other thing is to be confident that your voice is enough and that it is powerful. And I know that takes time to develop. And so maybe you have to practice speaking and standing up for yourself or sharing your perspective in smaller spaces. But as those opportunities in those spaces grow, your confidence will also grow. So I'll tell a fun story. I took years of college radio as a part of my journalism background. And so I actually couldn't stand the sound of my voice when I started either. It was very disorienting to like go and hear my broadcast because I would record them. I was like, who is this person? It was uncomfortable. It
yeah,
took it took me years to get comfortable, but it did not take me years to decide to use my voice. And so that's my encouragement to you is that you speak even when you're uncomfortable, when it's scary, when you don't love your voice, because what you have to say has so much value that it's too expensive to be quiet.
yeah, yeah. I think that's a very powerful advice. Now, I know many people who will not be even behind the camera. I never used to speak up in public. I never used to in class when the teachers, teachers will go around class and they call on you to read. Every time I was trembling, don't call me, don't call me. So I know at that time it was quite an experience, but over the time and with experience observing other people and knowing more about myself, I started to step up. I did an online virtual speech competition, and that is actually what led to starting this podcasting. I felt more confident after that. So there's value in finding your inner greatness. So Uniqueka, if somebody is watching this and they're liking everything that you've talked about so far, your communications, your personal branding, your advice on careers, mentorship, and also just people loving their voice, how can they find you?
Okay, so the easiest way to probably find me is at my website, uniquewalcott.com. That's my first name and last name.com. If you like LinkedIn, you can find me there. It's also linked to my name, or on Instagram if that's your preference at Billion Dollar Bid Writer. Um, Always happy to have a coffee chat or answer a few quick questions. So feel free to reach out. Don't be shy, even if it's just to say, hey, I enjoyed watching this episode.
Yeah. What if they want to work with you now as a next step based on they've loved what you've said so far? What will you tell them?
Oh, email me at hello@uniquewalcott.com and we can get on a quick phone call and figure out if we're a good fit to work together.
Yeah. So Uniqueka, what's one thing does new proposal writers need to know?
This is probably an odd response for some folks. One of the things that proposal writers who are new need to know is that it is okay to ask questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Because you are new, you're being introduced to an entirely new industry, an entirely new set of vocabulary words, and a way of writing. And so it's okay to ask questions and to truly stay curious is the best piece of advice I can give to you. It's not about which book you could read or how many proposals you got to crank out. Come curious. You might discover that there is a lot of industry jargon when you begin to explore the RFPs or government contract opportunities. So RFP is request for proposal, request for qualifications is RFQ, and RFI is request for information. And you might even see RFQ as request for quote. What I want you to understand is that an RFI is just a market research tool for the contractors to understand what is available in the marketplace. So if you respond to something like this, do not expect to be awarded a contract. You may not even get a response. If you look for something like a request for quote or request for qualifications, those are often things that lead to the opportunity for you to be awarded a contract. And obviously, there's no guarantee. One of the things you'll discover when you're going through these documents is that sometimes they will indicate the number of awards or types of awards. That's not always clear information. Those are things that you can ask during the questions and answers period that tends to be a part of the GovCon process. But those are just three sort of keywords you want to be familiar with as you begin on your journey. But there are more words than I care to count that you probably want to get acquainted with. So take your time, do your research to understand the language that is our industry, because it's not the same as traditional marketing where you think about products and placement and price. These are all parts of the way we respond, but they don't use exactly the same language.
Thank you very much, Uniqueka. I think it's been a good experience during this show, this podcasting. And it's always fun to talk to you about your own experiences that you've shared with us. And I know the audience are going to benefit from that. And also your expertise in communications, in personal branding, in marketing, which we didn't get too much into marketing, but it's in between the discussions. Unless you have anything to say about marketing.
The only thing I wanted to add is that I find I've put CPSM on the screen. People go, what do these letters mean? So I'm a certified professional services marketer. And this is a certification I got back in 2019 that really helps solidify my expertise around the proposal development process, but also things like promotional activities and market research. And I think we'll leave it there. If people are curious to learn more, reach out.
I think anybody watching this today They are going to enjoy it. They're going to hopefully take action and at least change their life. You've done that today, and I'm happy to host you again the second time. Any last advice for the audience?
If you are on the fence about whether or not you need a personal brand, I hate to inform you, you have one and you're not leveraging it. Commit to the process so that you can take advantage of all the opportunities that await you.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It's been nice chatting with you.
Thank you.